Mafia boss saw his driver's daughter panicking at 12:59 a.m. What she whispered made him shiver. The digital clock on the vintage Rolls-Royce dashboard read 12:55 a.m. when I realized my hands would not stop shaking. The wrench I had been gripping slipped from my fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of the underground garage with a metallic echo that seemed to reverberate forever. I was lying on my back beneath the Don's armored SUV, staring up at the undercarriage where moments ago I had seen something that made my blood turn to ice. A small black device. Magnetic. With a distinctive click pattern I had heard described only once in my entire life. Before we begin, please take a moment to support this channel by clicking the like, share, and subscribe button so you can keep enjoying awesome stories like this. Thank you. I was supposed to be doing a simple oil change and brake inspection. Supposed to be covering the routine maintenance my father, Ricardo Torres, would normally handle himself. But Papa was home fighting the flu, running a fever of 102, and I had promised him I would take care of the fleet while he recovered. I had not expected taking care of the fleet to include discovering a bomb rigged to the ignition. Had not expected to hear footsteps approaching while I was trapped beneath 3 tons of armored steel. Had not expected Dominic Russo's polished shoes to appear in my limited field of vision, followed by his cold voice asking what I was doing under the Don's personal vehicle at this hour. Had not expected hands dragging me out from under the chassis by my ankles. Had not expected to be cornered against the concrete support pillar at 12:59 a.m., shaking so violently I thought my bones might rattle apart. My name is Shiver Torres, and 72 hours ago, my life was completely ordinary. I was 23 years old, a third-year nursing student at City Hospital's accelerated program, working part-time at my father's auto shop to pay tuition. I lived in a small apartment above the garage, visited Papa every morning for coffee before classes, and spent my weekends rebuilding vintage engines while memorizing anatomy textbooks. My life was predictable, safe, focused. I liked it that way. I had plans. Finish nursing school. Open a free clinic in our neighborhood. Maybe keep restoring classic cars on the side because there was something meditative about bringing broken machines back to life. My father, Ricardo Torres, had worked for the Sal crime family for 23 years, serving as Paulo Sal's personal driver and maintaining the family's extensive fleet of vehicles. The job paid extraordinarily well for a mechanic position and came with benefits and security that seemed almost suspicious. Because Paulo Sal was not just a successful businessman. He was the Don of the most powerful organized crime family on the East Coast, a position he had inherited after his twin brother Mateo's assassination in 1998 and expanded with calculated precision that bordered on genius. Everyone knew what Paulo Sal was. Some of his businesses were legitimate. The luxury car dealership, the import-export company, the real estate holdings. But those were just the visible surface of an empire built on activities no one discussed openly. My father had made peace with working for a man like that decades ago, reasoning that he only maintained vehicles, never involved himself in the actual operations, and was treated with more respect and compensated better than any legitimate garage could offer. I had met Paulo Sal exactly 5 times in my life. Once when I was 7 and Papa had brought me to see the garage facility. Paulo had appeared unexpectedly and spent 20 minutes talking to me about how engines work, seeming genuinely interested in a child's rambling questions. The second time was at my high school graduation 6 years ago, when Paulo had sent an expensive medical textbook set with a note congratulating me on earning my scholarship. The third was at a community event 3 years ago, where Papa's shop had provided restoration services for a charity auction. Paulo had complimented my work on a 1967 Mustang with what seemed like genuine admiration. The fourth was at a family gathering 2 years ago when Paulo had personally thanked me for keeping Papa's spirits up after my mother's death. The fifth was 3 days ago, November 11th, 2024, When Papa collapsed with the flu and Paolo had personally called to tell me he expected my father to rest and recover fully, and that I would be covering his essential duties until then. Each interaction had reinforced the same impression. Paolo Sal was dangerous, ruthless, feared by everyone who understood what his name represented. But he was also surprisingly protective of those who served him loyally. He was perhaps 6 feet 2 inches, with dark hair, sharp features that made him look perpetually alert, and eyes so dark they appeared black in most lighting. He had visible tattoos creeping up from his collar, a gold chain that probably cost more than my tuition, and the kind of presence that made rooms go quiet when he entered. He dressed in expensive suits, spoke with absolute authority, and carried himself like someone who had never questioned whether he would be obeyed. When Papa had called me 3 days ago, his voice rough with fever, I had immediately agreed to cover his duties. Just the basics, Mija, he had said between coughs. Oil changes on the personal vehicles. The brake inspection on the rolls. Nothing complicated. Dominic will give you the keys and the schedule. Dominic Russo, the underboss. Paolo's second-in-command. I had met him twice before, and both times something about him had made my skin crawl. He smiled too much. Watched too carefully. Moved with the contained energy of something predatory waiting for the right moment to strike. Your father speaks highly of your skills, Paolo had said when he called to confirm the arrangement. His voice was surprisingly warm. Dominic will provide access to the garage and the maintenance logs. You handle the vehicles the same way Ricardo does. No shortcuts. No questions about where they have been. And Shavonda, his tone had shifted slightly. If you see anything unusual, anything that concerns you, you contact me directly. Not Dominic. Not anyone else. Me. Understood. I had understood. At least, I thought I had. The pay he offered was absurd. For times what I made at Papa's shop, for temporary work covering maybe 2 weeks until Papa recovered. I should have asked why he was paying so much for simple maintenance. Should have wondered why he emphasized contacting him directly. But I was focused on helping my father, on ensuring he could rest without worrying about losing his position. The first 2 nights had been straightforward. I had performed standard maintenance on 4 vehicles in the fleet. Changed oil. Inspected brakes. Rotated tires. Dominic had watched me work the first night, making comments that seemed to assess whether I actually knew what I was doing. When I rebuilt a fuel injection system in half the time the manual suggested, he had nodded with what might have been respect. Or calculation. With Dominic, it was impossible to tell. The second night, I had worked alone. The underground garage was silent except for the sound of my tools and my own breathing. I had finished early, texted the completion report to the number Paolo had provided, and gone home feeling accomplished. Papa had been proud when I told him how smoothly it was going. Tonight, November 14th, had been different from the moment I arrived. Dominic had been waiting for me at the garage entrance, his usual smile slightly wider. Special job tonight, Shavonda. The Don's personal SUV needs a full inspection before an important meeting tomorrow. Every system. Brakes, suspension, engine, electrical. I need you to be thorough. Something in his tone had made me uneasy, but I had nodded. Thorough inspections were part of the job. I had begun with the exterior, working my way systematically through each component. Everything had checked out perfectly until I slid beneath the chassis to inspect the undercarriage. That was when I saw it. A small device attached to the inside of the front wheel well. Black casing. Magnetic mounting. And when I adjusted my position to get a better look, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic clicking. Not the tick of a normal timer. This was different. Syncopated. 3 short clicks, pause, 2 long clicks, pause, repeat. My father's voice echoed in my memory from years ago when I was maybe 15, sitting in the garage late one night while he worked on an old Mercedes. I had asked him about Matteo Sal, Paolo's twin brother, whose death I had overheard mentioned in hushed tones. Papa had looked at me seriously and said, "Matteo died in a car explosion, Mija. Bomb under the ignition. The kind that clicks in a specific pattern before it activates. 3 short, 2 long. Like a heartbeat that stops." I had been staring at that exact pattern, frozen beneath the SUV, when Dominic's shoes appeared. "Find something interesting?" His voice had been casual, but there was an edge beneath it. I had tried to sound normal, professional. "Just checking the suspension. Everything looks good." "Really?" He had crouched down, his face appearing at the edge of the vehicle. "Because from where I am standing, it looks like you are inspecting something you were not supposed to find." My heart had slammed against my ribs. "I don't know what you mean. If you cannot stand cowards like Dominic who plant bombs and threaten innocent women, hit subscribe. Only people who side with terrorists and traitors will scroll past." "Let me be clear, Shavonda." Dominic's hand had shot under the chassis, grabbing my wrist with crushing force. "You are going to slide out from under that vehicle very slowly. You are going to walk to the corner of this garage. And you are going to stay there while I figure out what to do with you." I had tried to pull free, but his grip was iron. He dragged me out by my arm, scraping my back against the concrete. My other hand still gripped the wrench, and when I cleared the vehicle, I swung it wildly at his head. He dodged, but it gave me enough space to scramble backward, putting the support pillar between us. "You stupid girl." Dominic stalked toward me, no longer smiling. "Do you have any idea what you have just done? You have seen something you should not have seen. Now I have to clean up this mess." "Paolo needs to know," I gasped, my back pressed against the cold concrete. "There's a bomb. Someone is trying to kill him." "Someone." Dominic laughed, and the sound made my stomach turn. "You really are naive. Who do you think put it there, Shavonda? Who do you think has access to Paolo's personal vehicles? Who do you think has been planning this for 6 months?" The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. The underboss. The man Paolo trusted most. The man positioned to take control when Paolo died. "Why are you telling me this?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Because it does not matter." Dominic moved closer. "You are Ricardo's daughter. A nursing student who fixes cars in her spare time. Who is going to believe you?" And even if they did, his expression shifted to something darker. "Even if they did, you will not live long enough to tell anyone." That was when I heard it. The distant mechanical sound of the garage's external door opening. Car tires on the ramp. An engine I recognized immediately. The Rolls-Royce Phantom. Paolo's personal vehicle for private meetings. Dominic heard it too. His eyes flickered toward the entrance, then back to me. "Do not move. Do not make a sound. If you do, I will kill you and your father both." The Rolls entered the garage, its headlights sweeping across the space. It pulled to a stop near the SUV I had been inspecting. The engine cut off. The driver's door opened. Paulo Sal stepped out. He was wearing a dark suit, his face showing the fatigue of whatever meeting he had just concluded. His eyes scanned the garage, noting immediately that something was wrong. The tools scattered by the SUV. The work light still on. The mechanic nowhere visible. "Dominic." Paulo's voice cut through the silence. "Why are you in the garage at?" He checked his watch. 12:59 a.m.? Where's the Torres girl? Dominic's hand was suddenly at the small of his back, and I knew with absolute certainty he was reaching for a weapon. Time seemed to slow. Paolo was unarmed, had just gotten out of his car, completely vulnerable. Dominic was positioned perfectly for a clear shot. After Paolo was dead, Dominic would eliminate me, plant evidence to frame Papa, and take control of the organization. I had maybe 3 seconds to make a choice. I could stay silent. Stay hidden. Let Dominic shoot Paolo and then pray I could escape before Dominic found me. Or I could do something incredibly stupid. I stepped out from behind the pillar, my hands raised, still trembling violently. Mr. Sal, I called out, my voice shaking as badly as my hands. Don't move. There's. Dominic spun toward me, his hand completing its path to his weapon. Paolo's eyes locked on me, then shifted to Dominic, and I saw his expression change as he understood the situation in an instant. There's a bomb under your SUV, I continued, the words tumbling out. Under the ignition. It clicks, my voice broke. It clicks like the one that killed Matteo. The garage went absolutely still. Paolo's face transformed. Not with fear. With something far more dangerous. What did you just say? 3 short clicks, too long, I whispered, because I could not seem to make my voice louder. Like a heartbeat that stops. Papa told me that was how Matteo died. I found it under the SUV 20 minutes ago. I heard it clicking. Real men protect the innocent and punish traitors. Comment justice if you refuse to side with snakes like Dominic who betray their own family. Dominic drew his weapon, but Paolo was faster. His hand shot inside his jacket, pulling his own gun with practiced speed, leveling it at his underboss. Do not, Paolo said quietly, do not make me kill you before I understand what is happening. She is lying, Dominic said immediately. I caught her sabotaging your vehicle. She is working for the Castellanos. This is an obvious frame job. Then explain. Paolo's voice was deadly calm, how she knows about the device that killed my brother. That information never left the inner circle. The police report said generic bomb. The newspapers said explosion. Only 5 people knew about the clicking pattern. His eyes never left Dominic. 4 of them are dead now. That leaves you and me. Dominic's expression flickered. Calculation. Desperation. The realization that his plan had unraveled. Last chance, Dominic. Lower your weapon. Instead, Dominic swung his gun toward me. I dropped to the ground as 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Dominic's bullet sparked off the concrete where my head had been a second earlier. Paolo's bullet caught Dominic in the shoulder, spinning him backward. The gun clattered from Dominic's hand, and he collapsed against the SUV, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Paolo crossed the distance in 3 strides, kicked Dominic's weapon away, and stood over him. You planted the bomb. You have been planning to kill me. It was not a question. Dominic laughed, the sound wet and pained. For 6 months, Paolo. 6 months of planning. 6 months of positioning myself. And this stupid girl and her stupid dead man stories, he coughed. You should have died tonight. Paolo's jaw tightened. Guards. Secure him. Medical team to the garage. And someone check that device. Carefully. 2 men I had not noticed appeared from the shadows, moving to restrain Dominic. Paolo turned to me, and I realized I was still on the ground, still shaking, still gripping that wrench like it was the only solid thing in my reality. He approached slowly, holstering his weapon. He crouched beside me, his dark eyes searching my face. Shavonda, you can let go of the wrench. You are safe. I tried to release it, but my fingers would not cooperate. The adrenaline that had kept me functioning was draining away, leaving me hollow and trembling. I could not stop shaking. Could not make the tremors stop. My breath came in short, sharp gasps that I could not control. Breathe, Paolo said quietly. He did not touch me, just stayed crouched at my level. In through your nose. Out through your mouth. You're having a panic response. It is normal after trauma. He was going to kill you, I whispered. He was going to shoot you and then frame Papa and... But he did not. Because you warned me. Something shifted in his expression. You stepped out from cover to warn me, knowing he would try to kill you for it. I had not thought about it that way. I had just reacted. How did you know about the clicking pattern? Paolo asked. Papa told me. Years ago. He said Matteo died because of a bomb that clicked like a heartbeat stopping. 3 short, too long. Paolo was silent for a long moment. Your father should not have known that detail. My heart sank. Had I just gotten Papa in trouble? But I am glad he did. Paolo's voice softened slightly, because it just saved my life. He stood, extended his hand down to me. Come. You are going to stand up. You are going to let my people handle this situation. And then you are going to come with me. Where? I managed to ask. Somewhere safe. His eyes were unreadable. Because if Dominic was planning this, there are others involved. A conspiracy this deep does not live in one man's mind. And you, Shavonda Torres, are now the only witness who can identify everyone Dominic has been meeting with. Which makes you either the most valuable asset I have, he paused, or the next target. I let him help me to my feet. My legs barely supported me, but his hand remained steady under my elbow. The garage clock read exactly 12:59 a.m. And somehow I knew that time would never feel the same again. Paolo's penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower, and I had never felt more out of place in my entire life. The elevator ride had been silent except for the soft hum of machinery and my own ragged breathing. Paolo stood beside me, his presence somehow both reassuring and terrifying, while two of his guards flanked us with expressions that revealed nothing. When the elevator doors opened directly into his private residence, I had expected something cold and intimidating. What I found instead was understated elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Dark hardwood floors. Leather furniture that looked both expensive and comfortable. Bookshelves lined with volumes that appeared actually read, not just decorative. A grand piano in the corner that showed signs of use. Sit, Paolo instructed, gesturing to the sofa. It was not a request. I sat, still wearing my grease-stained coveralls, still clutching my work jacket like a shield. One of the guards disappeared down a hallway while the other positioned himself near the elevator. Paolo poured 2 glasses of something amber from a crystal decanter, brought one to me, then sat in the chair across from me. Drink, he said. It will help with the shaking. I took a sip. Whiskey. Expensive whiskey that burned going down but spread warmth through my chest. My hands were still trembling so badly the liquid rippled in the glass. Paolo studied me with those unreadable dark eyes. Tell me exactly what happened tonight. From the beginning. Leave nothing out. So I told him. About arriving at the garage. About sliding under the SUV for the inspection. About seeing the device and hearing the clicking pattern. About Dominic appearing and dragging me out. About his confession that he had planted the bomb himself. If manipulation and gaslighting make you sick, comment, truth matters. Only people who support liars and frame jobs will stay silent. Paolo's expression remained controlled throughout, but I saw his jaw tighten when I described Dominic's threat against Papa. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, swirling the whiskey in his glass. Dominic told me a different story, Paolo said finally. In the 30 seconds before my guards sedated him, he claimed you were working for the Castellano family. That you had planted the device yourself and invented the story about the clicking pattern to gain my trust. That your father had been feeding information to my enemies for months. My stomach dropped. That's not true. Papa would never. I know. Paolo's interruption was quiet but absolute. Because Dominic made a critical mistake in his story. He claimed you told me about the bomb to frame him because the Castellanos promised to pay your father's medical debts. I blinked. What medical debts? Papa has the flu. Exactly. Paolo leaned forward slightly. Your father has no medical debts. He has full health coverage through my organization and no chronic conditions requiring expensive treatment. Dominic invented a motive that does not exist. His eyes held mine. But more importantly, there is no possible way you could have known about the clicking pattern unless you actually heard it. That detail never appeared in any report, any newspaper, any investigation. The only people who knew were the bomb squad technician who is now dead, the detective who is now dead, my father who is now dead, Dominic, and myself. And Papa, I whispered. Somehow Papa knew. Yes. Paulo's voice carried a note of curiosity. Somehow your father knew. Which means either he was closer to my brother than I realized, or he paused. Or he overheard something he was never supposed to hear and had the good sense to keep it to himself for 26 years. The weight of that settled over me. Papa had kept that secret for my entire life. Had never told anyone except his teenage daughter during a late-night conversation he probably thought I would forget. You saved my life tonight, Shavonda, Paulo said quietly. But you have also become the most dangerous liability in my organization. Because you can identify Dominic as a traitor, and whoever he was working with will want you dead before you can talk. How did your father know about the clicking pattern? Paulo's voice had gone cold, the warmth from moments ago evaporating like steam. He set his glass down with a controlled precision that was somehow more threatening than violence. I need the truth, Shavonda. All of it. Because if your father was involved in my brother's death— He wasn't, I said quickly, my voice cracking. Papa would never. He loved Mateo. I stopped, realizing what I had just revealed. Paulo's eyes narrowed. Loved. Past tense. As if he knew him personally. My mouth went dry. I had walked straight into the trap. I didn't mean. Stop. Paulo stood, pacing to the windows, his silhouette dark against the city lights. No more deflection. No more half-truths. How did Ricardo know my brother? I drew a shaky breath, knowing I was about to expose a part of Papa's life he had kept carefully hidden. Papa was your driver before he was just the mechanic. When you and Mateo were younger. Before the split in the organization. Before I hesitated. Before Mateo died. Paulo turned slowly. Ricardo drove for both of us? For years. I was little. Maybe 4 or 5 when it started. Papa couldn't always find childcare, so sometimes I twisted my hands together. Sometimes he'd put me in the back seat. Tell me to be quiet. Tell me to pretend I was invisible. Understanding dawned in Paulo's expression, followed by something that might have been horror. You were in the car. During family discussions. During strategy meetings. I didn't understand most of it, I said quickly. I was a kid. I'd draw pictures or sleep or play with my toys. But sometimes I'd listen. Sometimes things would stick. I met his eyes. The night before Mateo died, you and him were arguing in the back seat. About loyalty. About someone in the organization neither of you trusted. Mateo said, my voice dropped to a whisper. He said, if they come for me, it'll be with the clicking heart. 3 short, 2 long. Just like Father warned us about. Real men listen before they strike. Comment, truth matters if you refuse to side with manipulators who twist the narrative like Dominic. Paulo's face had gone completely still. You were 5 years old and you remember the exact words. Some things you don't forget, I said quietly. The next day, Papa came home crying. He told Mama that Mateo was gone. That the clicking heart had stopped. I couldn't sleep. The penthouse had a guest room that was larger than my entire apartment, with a bed so expensive it probably cost more than my tuition, but every time I closed my eyes I saw Dominic's gun swinging toward me. Heard the clicking pattern from the bomb. Felt the cold concrete against my back as I pressed myself into the corner. The bedside clock read 12:57 a.m. My chest started tightening. My breathing went shallow. I knew what was coming because it had been the same for the past 3 nights since the garage. The panic hit at exactly 12:59, like my body had set an internal alarm to relive the worst moment of my life. I threw off the covers and stumbled to the balcony doors, needing air, needing space, needing anything other than the suffocating darkness of the bedroom. The November wind bit through my borrowed t-shirt, but the cold helped ground me. I gripped the railing, forcing myself to breathe in counts. For in, hold 4, for out. 12:58. You should be sleeping. Paulo's voice came from behind me, quiet enough not to startle, but close enough that I knew he had been watching. I didn't turn around. Can't. Because of what happened. It wasn't a question. I heard him step onto the balcony, felt his presence a few feet away, but he didn't come closer. Didn't touch me. Just stood there in his own silence. 12:59. The panic crested like a wave. My hands started shaking on the railing. My vision tunneled. I heard myself making a sound that was half gasp, half sob, and I hated it. Hated being this weak in front of him. The panic will pass, Paolo said, his voice steady. 60 seconds. That's all it takes. Ride it out. How do you know? I managed through chattering teeth. Because I had them for 2 years after Matteo died. Every night at the time I got the phone call. 3:47 a.m. He was quiet for a moment. They eventually stop controlling you. The fear becomes familiar. Manageable. We stood in silence while my breathing slowly returned to normal. The shaking subsided. The tunnel vision cleared. Paolo was right. 60 seconds, maybe 90, and the worst of it had passed. Better, he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. What helps you think about something else? Engines, I said without thinking. Mechanical systems. There's a logic to them. A predictability. If this gear turns, that shaft moves. If this valve opens, that cylinder fires. It makes sense. Paolo moved to lean against the railing beside me, keeping respectful distance. Tell me about the most complex engine you've rebuilt. So I did. I told him about the 1956 Ferrari 250 GT that had come into Papa's shop 2 years ago, completely seized. How I had spent 6 months sourcing parts, machining custom components when originals weren't available. How the V12 engine was essentially 12 interconnected puzzles that all had to work in perfect harmony. Paolo listened without interrupting. Asked questions that showed he actually understood what I was talking about. At some point I realized I had stopped shaking entirely. Had been talking animatedly with my hands for the past 20 minutes about compression ratios and valve timing. You have a gift, Paolo said when I finally paused. The way you see systems. How they interconnect. That's rare intelligence. I looked at him surprised. It's just mechanics. No. His dark eyes held mine. It's pattern recognition. Systems analysis. The same skill that let you identify the bomb mechanism. The same skill that let you remember a conversation from 18 years ago and understand its significance. He straightened from the railing. That kind of intelligence is dangerous, Shavonda. In the right way. He left me on the balcony with those words hanging in the cold air. I stayed until the city lights started blending with the first hints of dawn, thinking about gears and systems and the way everything connected if you just knew how to look. The call came at 7 a.m. on the 4th morning. Paolo answered his phone while I was making coffee in his kitchen, trying to feel useful and normal despite sleeping in a crime lord's penthouse. I watched his expression shift from neutral to something dark and dangerous. Keep him there. Touch nothing else. I'm coming now. He ended the call and looked at me. Get dressed. We're going to the garage. My stomach dropped. What happened? Evidence has been found in your father's locker. We need to go. Now. The drive took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. Paolo's jaw was set, his hands tight on the steering wheel of the Mercedes. He wouldn't tell me what evidence, wouldn't tell me who found it, just kept his eyes on the road with an intensity that terrified me. The garage was crowded when we arrived. 5 men I recognized as capos, senior members of the organization, stood in a semicircle around Papa's open locker. Inside, clearly visible, were documents. Photographs. What looked like schematics. Proof, said Vincent Caruso, one of the older capos, his voice hard. Proof that Ricardo Torres has been selling information to the Castellanos for months. Meeting schedules. Security details. Vehicle routes. He pulled out a photograph showing Papa apparently meeting with a known Castellano lieutenant in a parking garage. And this. Dated 3 weeks ago. No. The word came out strangled. Papa would never. He's been sick. He hasn't even left the house in days. The evidence doesn't lie, another capo said coldly. Your father is a traitor. The penalty for betrayal is clear. Paolo stepped forward, taking the photograph, studying it with careful attention. When was this locker last accessed? 2 days ago, according to the logs, Vincent said. After the incident with Dominic. Convenient timing. Paolo's voice was neutral, but I heard the edge beneath it. My most trusted underboss is exposed as a traitor, and suddenly evidence appears implicating my driver. Evidence that would redirect attention away from Dominic's network. Are you suggesting this is planted? Vincent demanded. I'm suggesting it's worth investigating before we execute a man who has served this family loyally for 23 years. Loyalty. Another capo scoffed. His daughter is the one who accused Dominic. This could all be a setup to eliminate competition for the Castellanos. The girl frames Dominic, we remove our own underboss, and meanwhile the real traitor has been here all along. Dominic is trying to destroy an innocent family to cover his own crimes. Hit like if you stand against liars and toxic frame jobs. Please. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but determined. Check the metadata on those photos. Check where Papa actually was 3 weeks ago. He keeps detailed calendars. Medical records. He had the flu. He has doctor's visits documented. This is fake. This has to be fake. The girl is obviously protecting her father, Vincent said dismissively. The girl, Paolo's voice cut like a blade, saved my life 4 days ago. While Dominic was seconds from shooting me in the back, Shavonda stepped into his line of fire to warn me. That doesn't sound like someone working for my enemies. Or it's the perfect cover, the capo countered. Sacrifice Dominic, gain your trust, eliminate Ricardo's competition, and position themselves as heroes while feeding information to the Castellanos. Paolo was silent for a long moment. I could see the calculation in his eyes. The political pressure from the other capos. The weight of tradition that demanded swift justice for betrayal. My father's life hanging in the balance. 48 hours, Paolo said finally. I will investigate this personally. If Ricardo is guilty, justice will be served. But I will not execute a loyal man based on evidence that appears the moment it's convenient for Dominic's allies. Dominic has allies? Vincent's eyes narrowed. Every conspiracy has more than one participant. Paolo's gaze swept the gathered capos. And I intend to find every single one before this is finished. You're driving. Paolo tossed me the keys to the armored Mercedes, the same vehicle I had inspected 1,000 times, but never actually operated. I caught them reflexively, confusion crossing my face. What? The meeting is in 40 minutes. Neutral territory. The Castellano family wants to discuss Dominic's accusations against your father. Paolo was already moving toward the passenger side. You know every inch of this car. You know the engine, the handling, the armor plating, the emergency systems. You know it better than anyone, including me. I'm a mechanic, not a driver. My hands were shaking again, the keys feeling impossibly heavy. Paolo paused, his hand on the door handle, and looked at me across the roof of the Mercedes. If someone tries to kill us tonight, I need a driver who understands this machine at an instinctive level. Someone who knows exactly what it can do, what it can survive, how to push it past its limits if necessary. His dark eyes held mine. Your father drove for my family for 15 years because he had that gift. You have it too. I saw it in how you work. How you think. You're putting your life in my hands. Yes. His voice was absolutely certain. I am. I slid into the driver's seat, adjusting the mirrors with muscle memory from maintenance checks. The engine started with a purr I had tuned myself 3 weeks ago. Paolo settled into the passenger seat, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency before holstering it. Route? I asked, surprised my voice was steady. Industrial District. Warehouse 7. Multiple approach vectors, which means multiple ambush points. He glanced at me. If anything happens, you don't stop. You don't ask questions. You get us out alive. Understood. I nodded, pulled out of the garage, and merged into evening traffic. The drive started normally. Paolo made phone calls in Italian, his voice low and controlled. I focused on the road, on the feel of the car, on the weight of the armor plating affecting the handling. This wasn't like the light vehicles I usually drove. This was 3 tons of reinforced steel that required different instincts. We were 2 blocks from the warehouse when Paolo's phone buzzed with a text. His entire body went tense. It's a setup. The Castellanos aren't here. Dominic's people are. How many? I asked, my hands tightening on the wheel. Unknown. But headlights flared in the rearview mirror. 2 SUVs accelerating behind us. 3 cars minimum. They're boxing us in. A van pulled out from a side street ahead, blocking our route. More vehicles appeared from the parallel street. My mind raced through options, analyzing the urban grid like a mechanical system. Roads were just channels. Traffic patterns were just flows. Find the gap. Hold on. I didn't wait for permission. I yanked the wheel hard right, jumping the curb into an alley. The Mercedes' suspension absorbed the impact with a grinding protest. Behind us, the pursuing vehicles scrambled to adjust. This alley dead ends, Paolo said, but there was no panic in his voice. Just observation. Not for us. I accelerated, the walls flashing past inches from the mirrors. At the end, instead of the brick wall everyone expected, there was a loading dock with a ramp. I had seen it during my mental mapping of the district. The Mercedes launched off the ramp, sailed over a chain-link fence, and crashed down in an adjacent parking lot. The pursuing vehicles couldn't follow the angle. Too wide. Wrong suspension. Paolo was gripping the door handle, but when I glanced at him, he was almost smiling. Where did you learn to drive like that? Papa used to take me to abandoned lots when I was 16. Said every Torah should know how to handle a car like their life depended on it. I took a sharp left, then another right, putting distance between us and the ambush point. Guess he was right. Your father, Paolo said quietly, is full of surprises. We drove in silence for several minutes, adrenaline slowly fading. When I finally pulled into a safe location, a restaurant Paolo owned where armed guards immediately surrounded the vehicle, I realized my hands had stopped shaking entirely. Paolo turned to me before getting out. That wasn't captive and captor back there. No, I agreed softly. It wasn't. Partners watch each other's backs. He held my gaze. Thank you for watching mine. I couldn't stop thinking about the evidence in Papa's locker. Something about it nagged at me like a stripped bolt that wouldn't come free. At 3 a.m., unable to sleep despite exhaustion, I sat at Paolo's dining table with my laptop and the garage access logs he had given me permission to review. You should rest, Paolo said, appearing from his office where he had been on calls for hours. We have investigators handling this. Your investigators are looking for patterns in meetings and phone records, I said, scrolling through maintenance logs. I'm looking at something else. He poured himself coffee and sat across from me. Waiting. The photograph in Papa's locker. The one showing him meeting the Castellano lieutenant 3 weeks ago. I pulled up a calendar overlay. That was November 3rd, according to the date stamp. But look. I turned the laptop toward him. November 3rd, Papa performed a complete transmission rebuild on your personal Bentley. The job took 11 hours. Started at 6 a.m., finished at 5 p.m. There are 3 witnesses who confirmed he never left the garage. Paolo leaned forward, studying the screen. The photograph is fake. Or taken on a different date, and the metadata was altered. I switched to another screen. But here's what's interesting. To plant that evidence in Papa's locker, someone needed garage access. The locker area requires a specific keycard. Only 5 people have them. You, Papa, Dominic, and 2 security supervisors. One of the supervisors could have been bribed. Maybe. But look at the access logs. I highlighted a series of entries. Someone accessed Papa's locker at 2:17 a.m. on November 17th, the night after the bomb incident. The keycard used was I paused, making sure I was reading it correctly. Dominic's keycard. Paolo's expression went cold. Dominic was in custody. Sedated. Under guard. Exactly. Which means either someone cloned his keycard, or I pulled up another log. Or Dominic gave it to someone before the garage incident. Look at this. On November 10th, 4 days before everything happened, Dominic's keycard accessed a restricted file. The complete list of everyone who knows about Matteo's death. The investigation files. The bomb specifications. Smart people pay attention to details. Only haters and scammers want the truth to stay hidden. Subscribe if you support justice. He was preparing, Paolo said quietly. Gathering information to use in his frame-up. And he wasn't working alone. I opened another file. Maintenance records show that someone accessed the Castellano family vehicles we service through the legitimate dealership. Not regular maintenance. Deep access. Computer systems. GPS tracking. Communication equipment. I highlighted the technician's signature. The work orders were approved by Vincent Caruso. Paolo went absolutely still. Vincent is one of my senior capos. Vincent is one of the people pressuring you to execute my father. I met his eyes. He's also the one who conveniently found the evidence in Papa's locker. And look at this. I pulled up security footage timestamps. Vincent accessed the garage 17 minutes before he called to report discovering the evidence. Why was he in the garage at 6:43 a.m. when he had no scheduled business there? Paolo stood, pulling out his phone. I need to make calls. Secure calls. There's more. I stopped him with my voice. The bomb under your SUV. The specific device. I looked up the components based on what I saw. That kind of magnetic housing with that clicking mechanism? It's not something you can buy. It has to be custom-made. There are only 3 machine shops in the city with the capability to manufacture something that precise. And one of them is owned by a subsidiary company. I traced the ownership through 4 shell corporations. I showed him the final documentation. It's owned by Vincent Caruso's brother-in-law. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications. Vincent has been working with Dominic from the beginning, Paolo said finally. Planning to eliminate me, frame your father as the traitor, and position themselves to take control. Not just Vincent. I pulled up one more document. The machine shop had 3 custom orders in the past year, matching the bomb specifications. 3 separate devices. 1 killed, I hesitated. 1 killed Matteo, Paolo finished, his voice deadly quiet. And they were planning to kill me the same way, using the method that would psychologically destroy me even if it didn't kill me immediately. He looked at me, and there was something frightening in his expression. How did you find all this? Systems analysis, I said, echoing his words from the balcony. Everything connects if you know how to look. The shipping docks at midnight looked like a graveyard of metal containers and shadows. Paolo had arranged a meeting with Vincent, claiming he had new evidence about the Castellano connection. What Vincent didn't know was that Paolo had wired the entire dock with his own security team and surveillance equipment. Stay in the car, Paolo instructed as we pulled up to the designated meeting point. Doors locked. Engine running. If anything goes wrong, you drive away. No heroics. Paolo. Promise me, Shavonda. His dark eyes were intense. What we're about to do is dangerous. I need to know you're safe. I promised, hating every word. Paolo stepped out into the open space between container stacks. Vincent appeared from the shadows, flanked by 4 men. Too many for a simple meeting. Paolo's hand drifted toward his weapon, but he kept his posture relaxed. You said you had evidence, Vincent called out. Something that proves Ricardo's innocence? I have evidence, Paolo agreed. Just not about Ricardo. Vincent's expression didn't change, but his men shifted position. Surrounding. Trapping. I know about the machine shop, Paolo continued. About the 3 custom devices. About Dominic's keycard accessing my brother's investigation files. About you finding evidence you planted yourself. You're making serious accusations, Paolo. Vincent's voice was cold. Based on what? The conspiracy theories of a mechanic's daughter. Based on facts. Records. Your own signatures on documents you thought were buried. That's when I saw them. More men, emerging from behind containers on both sides. At least a dozen. All armed. This wasn't a meeting. This was an execution. You were always too smart for your own good, Vincent said. Just like your brother. Matteo figured it out too, you know. Right before the clicking heart stopped. Paolo drew his weapon, but he was outnumbered. Outpositioned. The first shot rang out, and he dove behind a forklift, returning fire. His security team emerged from their positions, but Vincent's people had anticipated them. The dock erupted into chaos. I watched Paolo pinned down behind inadequate cover, rounds sparking off metal around him. Vincent's men were advancing, using the container stacks for cover. In maybe 90 seconds, they would have positioned to flank him. He would die here. I had promised to stay in the car. To drive away. To be safe. If you believe in fighting back against bullies instead of running away, comment strength. Cowards support the villain. Instead, I studied the dock layout with a mechanic's eye. The crane. The massive gantry crane used for moving shipping containers. It was positioned directly above Vincent's advancing men, a 40-foot container suspended from its cables. I kicked open the car door and ran. Shavonda, no. Paolo's shout barely registered. I reached the crane operator's cabin, praying it was unlocked. It was. I climbed inside, my hands finding controls I had only seen in maintenance manuals, but understood instinctively. Cranes were just mechanical systems. Levers and hydraulics and weights. Physics problems waiting to be solved. The engine growled to life. Vincent's men looked up too late. I released the magnetic lock. The 40-foot container dropped 30 feet and slammed into the ground directly in front of Paolo's position, creating a wall of steel between him and Vincent's shooters. The impact shook the entire dock. Dust and debris exploded outward. In the confusion, Paolo's security team pressed their advantage. I didn't wait to see the outcome. I was already moving the crane arm, repositioning another container, dropping it to create a second barrier that cut off Vincent's escape route. Gunfire continued, but the tactical situation had completely reversed. Vincent's men were now trapped between steel walls with no cover. Cease fire. Vincent's voice cut through the chaos. We surrender. I climbed down from the crane on shaking legs. Paolo emerged from behind the container I had dropped, his suit torn and dusty, a cut bleeding above his eye, but alive. His dark eyes found me across the dock. You promised to stay in the car, he said when I reached him. I lied. My voice was steadier than I expected. Besides, you needed a better shield. Something flickered in his expression. Not anger. Something else entirely. That was the most reckless, brilliant, terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. It was just physics, I said, but my hands were shaking again now that the adrenaline was fading. The crane could handle the weight distribution, and the drop angle would. Paolo pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me in a grip that felt desperate. You could have been killed. If they had seen you. If the container had shifted wrong. But I wasn't. I let myself lean into him, feeling his heart racing against my cheek. And neither were you. Around us, Paolo's men were securing Vincent and the surviving conspirators. The dock was littered with evidence of the betrayal. The conspiracy that had killed Matteo and nearly killed Paolo was finally, completely exposed. We ended up back at the penthouse as dawn was breaking over the city. Paolo dismissed his guards to the lobby, insisting we needed privacy. My hands had finally stopped shaking from the dock, but now they were trembling for a different reason. Delayed shock, maybe. Or the realization of what had almost happened. "Sit," Paolo said gently, guiding me to the sofa. "You're bleeding." I looked down, surprised to see a gash on my forearm where I must have scraped against the crane's metal ladder. The adrenaline had masked the pain entirely. Now it throbbed with each heartbeat. Paolo disappeared into the bathroom and returned with a first aid kit. He knelt in front of me, his expensive suit still covered in dock dust, and carefully cleaned the wound with antiseptic. His hands were steady where mine were not. "You didn't have to do this," I said quietly, watching him work. "Protect me. Risk everything for Papa and me. We're nobody." His hands stilled. He looked up at me, those dark eyes holding something I couldn't quite name. "Do you know what I felt when I walked into that garage at 12:59 a.m. and saw you huddled in the corner?" I shook my head. "Terror," he said simply. "Not because there was a bomb under my car. Not because my underboss had just tried to kill me. But because for the first time in 6 years, since Matteo died, I felt something other than numbness." He resumed bandaging my arm, his touch careful. "I've been living as a ghost, Shavonda. Going through motions. Running an empire, but not actually existing inside my own life. Paolo." And then you whispered about the clicking heart, and his voice caught. It didn't just scare me. It shivered through me. Woke something up that I thought had died with my brother. He secured the bandage and sat back, but didn't let go of my hand. "You were terrified, covered in grease and tears, shaking so hard you could barely speak. And you still stepped between me and Dominic's gun." "I couldn't let him kill you," I whispered. "Why?" His grip on my hand tightened. "You barely knew me. I was your father's employer. Someone dangerous. Someone most people fear." Because I struggled to put it into words. Because when you sat with me on the balcony at 12:59, you didn't treat me like I was broken. You didn't try to fix me or tell me to get over it. You just sat there and let me talk about engines until the panic passed. Tears were sliding down my face now. Nobody has ever just sat with me like that. Paolo moved from kneeling to sitting beside me on the sofa. He reached up and wiped the tears from my cheeks with his thumb, the gesture so tender it made my chest ache. "I spent 6 years making myself invisible," he said quietly. "Hiding behind the dawn, behind the empire, behind the reputation. Being feared but never known. And then you appeared. This brilliant, brave, impossible woman who sees systems nobody else notices and risks everything for people she loves. You made me feel visible again." "I'm just a mechanic," I said, but the words felt hollow now. "No." His voice was absolute. "You're the woman who saved my life twice. Who solved a conspiracy my own investigators missed. Who dropped a shipping container like you were playing chess." He cupped my face in both hands. "You're the woman who whispered about a clicking heart and woke me from the dead." The space between us felt charged, electric. His thumb traced my cheekbone, and I saw the question in his eyes before he voiced it. "I don't want you to be invisible anymore," Paolo said. "Not to me. Not to anyone. He stopped, seeming to struggle with words for the first time since I'd known him. "I want to keep waking up. With you. Because of you. Paolo, I'm Ricardo Torres's daughter. A nursing student who fixes cars. Your organization, your world, it's nothing without someone real in it." He leaned his forehead against mine. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now. I'm just asking you not to disappear. Stay visible. Stay." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Stay with me." I closed the distance between us, answering with a kiss that tasted like salt and smoke, and something that felt terrifyingly like hope. Paolo's arms wrapped around me, pulling me closer, and for the first time since 12:59 a.m. in that garage, I felt completely safe. When we finally pulled apart, the sun was fully up, light streaming through the windows. "Promise me something," Paulo said, his voice rough. "Promise me you'll never be invisible again. Not in your own life. Not in mine." "I promise," I whispered. "If you promise the same." "Deal." He pressed a kiss to my forehead. No more ghosts. No more hiding. Just us, figuring this out together. Outside, the city was waking up. Inside, something new was beginning. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the showroom, catching the sleek lines of the new Tesla Roadster I was inspecting. November 14th, 2030. 6 years to the day since everything changed in an underground garage at 12:59 a.m. "Torque specs are perfect," I called out to Marco, our lead technician. "But check the regenerative braking calibration on the passenger side. It's 0.3 seconds slower than optimal." Marco grinned. "You can hear 0.3 seconds?" "I can feel it," I corrected, running my hand along the chassis. "Everything should be symmetrical. That's the whole point of engineering." I straightened, wiping my hands on a cloth, and caught sight of Paulo watching me from the office window above the showroom floor. Even from this distance, I could see the smile on his face. The real one. The one that had taken months to surface after we dismantled Dominic and Vincent's conspiracy. Sal Luxury Motors had transformed over the past 6 years. What had once been a front for laundering money was now a legitimate, thriving dealership specializing in high-end electric vehicles. We'd kept the mechanical expertise and the reputation for excellence, but stripped away everything illegal. It hadn't been easy. Restructuring an empire never was. But Paulo had been determined to build something that wouldn't require his children to inherit blood debts and midnight conspiracies. Our children. The thought still made me smile. I climbed the stairs to the office, finding Paulo reviewing contracts with our lawyer. Legitimate contracts. Business loans and supplier agreements and the gloriously boring paperwork of a legal enterprise. "Lunch?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Paulo glanced at his watch, then at me, and something shifted in his expression. "It's 12:59 p.m., I clarified, crossing to him. "Middle of a sunny afternoon. Not a shadow in sight." He stood, pulling me close, his hand settling on the small swell of my stomach where our second child was growing. "Do you still wake up at 12:59 a.m.? "Sometimes," I admitted. "But now when I do, you're there. And it's not scary anymore. It's just a time." Paulo pressed a kiss to my temple. "Papa called earlier. He wants to know if we're still coming for Sunday dinner." "Wouldn't miss it." Papa had officially retired last year, spending his days teaching neighborhood kids about engines and spoiling his grandson, Matteo Paulo Sal, named for the uncle he would never meet. He's teaching little Maddie about carburetors. He's 3 years old. Papa started teaching me at 5. Maddie's advanced. I grinned. Takes after his mother. Paulo laughed, the sound genuine and warm. Terrifying thought. We stood together at the window, looking out over the showroom floor where our employees worked with pride in their craft. The business was thriving. Papa was healthy. The conspiracy that had nearly destroyed us was distant history. Dominic had died in prison 2 years ago. Vincent had turned state's evidence and disappeared into witness protection. The remaining capos who had been loyal to Paulo had either retired or transformed their own operations into legitimate enterprises. "Do you ever miss it?" I asked quietly. "The old world. The power." Paulo considered for a moment. "I miss my brother. I miss the version of myself that still had him." He turned me to face him. "But I don't miss being a ghost. I don't miss living in shadows. And I wouldn't trade what we've built for anything. Evil never wins in the long run. If you believe good people deserve a happy ending, hit that notification bell. Trolls who love misery won't do it." "What we've built," I echoed, looking around the office. Framed photos on the walls. Our wedding day. Little Maddie's first birthday. Papa and Paulo working on a vintage Rolls together, both of them grinning like kids. A legitimate empire. An empire where the most dangerous thing that happens is you dropping shipping containers on people's heads, Paolo teased. That was one time. 6 years ago. Let it go. Never. He kissed me, soft and lingering. That's the moment I knew I was completely lost to you. Watching you commandeer a crane like you were conducting an orchestra. The clock on the wall read 12:59 p.m. Sunlight flooded the office. Below us, customers browsed electric vehicles that would never be used in crimes. Employees worked jobs with benefits and retirement plans. A 3-year-old boy was learning about engines from his grandfather in a garage that smelled like motor oil and possibility. We had taken the clicking heart, the symbol of death and betrayal, and transformed it. Now 12:59 was just another minute. Sometimes bathed in darkness, yes, but more often filled with light. Come on, Paolo said, taking my hand. Let's go home. Sunday dinner prep waits for no one, and you know Papa will criticize my knife work. Your knife work is terrible, I agreed, following him toward the door. I'm a reformed crime boss, not a chef. You're my husband, I corrected. And our son's father. And the man who kept his promise to never let me be invisible. Paolo stopped, turned, and looked at me with those dark eyes that had once seemed so dangerous and now just looked like home. Best promise I ever made. We left the office together, walking into the bright November afternoon. The past was behind us. The future stretched ahead, clean and full of possibility. And the time, 12:59 p.m., was just a time. Nothing more, nothing less. Just another moment in a life we had fought for and won.